clicker. Okay. Okay. Just making sure this works.
Show up on time. On every single one. I was like,
We may or may not have done that on purpose. That's funny. Okie dokie. Here we go. So I'm going to preface this now. This lesson was very boring, and it was so lengthy. It was like 20 pages of just like kind of boring. So the best way for me to like teach this is if you guys like participate in discussion, because if not, it's going to be boring. Like I couldn't really fit in the game, couldn't really fit in a treat like I wanted to, because it's just kind of like facts and statements and a lot of it is discussion based, which is great. So love to hear from all of you. So these are the objectives. Does someone want to read them? Anyone? Thanks, Ainsley. Just do like 2.
Explain how the current reform movement has been shaped by previous efforts at reform. Explain how reform efforts focusing on standards, testing, and accountability are influencing the curriculum and classroom instruction.
Perfect. Okay, so first, this is kind of like our little starter. We're going to meet a person and just kind of have you guys evaluate what you would do or like how you would handle the situation. And then informal assessment today is just participation. Okay, who wants to read this? It's a lengthy, yes.
Okay, Emma Harrison has been offered a teaching job in a district near her home, and she's ecstatic. She's finally going out into the real world where she can put into practice what she's learned in school, and she can begin paying off her college loans and start to live. Everything seems great and so exciting. However, during her new teacher orientation and conversations with experienced teachers at her school, she finds that the teaching world is very different from what she thought it would be. She knows about standards because they were emphasized during her teaching preparation program and internship, but she didn't quite realize how important they were. Because they were somewhat abstract in her classes, and during her internship, they were ultimately the responsibility of her directing teacher. Now, both her principal and the district emphasize that her students will be held accountable by having them take state-mandated tests for meeting the standards, and her students' performance on the test will influence both her evaluations and her pay increases. And it gets worse. These same scores will also determine whether she will be rehired and awarded tenure in her district.
Perfect. Thank you. And then basically it goes on to say that was not even all of it. The legislature in her state has eliminated collective bargaining by teachers in her state, and she's a lot to think about when her teachers arrive next Monday. So how would you feel in the situation? What would you think? Because this is such a real world problem that you're going from being in this experience where it's kind of all planned out for you, and you kind of show up and you have some sort of an outline, and now you have to do it all on your own. And you're a first year teacher. You don't have any standards to set. Well, you don't have any standards that you're trying to go above, so you're setting the baseline standards. So how would you guys feel? What would you think? How would you handle the stress? Yeah.
When it said her pay raises and all of that was based on how the students do on the state testing.
Yeah.
And kids don't even try on that.
Mm-hmm.
So it's I don't, there goes my money because kids don't try.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I would try and figure out which class has the highest score in the school
Mm-hmm.
that she's going to, and then talk to that teacher and see how they get their students to do well on it, and what their teaching style is.
Yeah, that's great. Anyone else? Yeah, pretty basic. So it's there's a lot of stuff that goes into it. And when we get into reform, this will kind of make more sense of how to deal with situations, or the efforts that have been made to deal with these situations. So first, we have to define reform. And reform implies changes for schools, students, and teachers. And they're intended to improve the schools and the districts and the workplaces. So these policies are intended to make students have a successful learning experience, and then they're intended for teachers to have and administrators to have a good place to work. So they're just creating these changes overall to have better success for everyone, if that makes sense. So what are some examples that you guys have seen of reform in education? And we'll get into some, so you guys can discuss as partners, come up with a list or some ideas, and then we'll share with the class. Yeah, here, I'll go back to
changed like the policy for
Just like, what are examples that you have seen of reform like happening in schools? Like, what are changes that they make? You didn't do it?
I forgot. That's the first time I forgot to do like an assignment.
Not me. You're better than I am.
I forgot to do
What? You forget? I did it last night. Shocker.
Yeah, I'm not.
Here? D minus? I still have to turn in my, what is it? Teaching hours. I don't know why. Me neither. We'll have to talk about it. That's weird. Okay. Everyone done? We got some ideas? Okay. Who wants to share? Maddie.
Well, Oakland, we were just talking about, we've heard rumor that next year they're doing like early out Fridays and they're changing the schedules a little bit. I don't know if that's true, no.
I wish.
But that.
I feel like that's a rumor every year.
But one of my first
We did
teachers
try.
was talking
No,
about it.
like it was a real thing that we tried to get implemented and it got shot down.
Do teachers like the virtual Fridays and the?
Oh, we loved them so much.
And that's another thing we were talking
You made
about
music
reform too, was virtual Fridays, and that's kind of how this conversation sparked. But even though it's not happening, it's still like interesting to see that it's not just there have been reforms that have been made. It's like teachers and faculty, whatever, they're constantly working on reforming the school.
Yeah, for sure. Are we like the only school in the district that doesn't have like an early out or a late start?
That is
Yeah.
so dumb.
Guys, I don't know.
Well, because
Board decided.
we had an early out, they would have to
Because
change
why?
us to start
Board
instead of
decided.
Yeah.
Because that's where all the schools that do have an early out or a late start start at 7. They start early.
Yeah.
And they
No.
Eight's great. I think eight's early sometimes. It's not bad. Okay. Anybody else? Ainsley.
talking about this a while ago,
Okay, wait. Shh.
but it's a long time ago, but
Uh-huh.
desegregation.
Uh-huh. Yeah, that's a really good one.
I gave you credit, I said 6.
She really did. Anyone else? Any more ideas? No? We'll get into it more. Okay, moving on. So we did that. Okay, so the history of reform. So we got to go back. This is actually kind of a newer idea. It's like the 20th century. They're like, reform, all this stuff. So they saw, like I drew here, education is a pyramid. And so when I'll kind of stand up and explain this. So they saw that like the people who were high school dropouts, didn't succeed in education, didn't get good grades, they would stay at the bottom. They'd be factory workers, and they'd do that because that's great. We didn't really care about them as much. And then the people who were successful, they were like upper class. Those are CEOs, the successful people. And it's kind of interesting because over time, like there's been trends of people who have been successful without going to college or like even dropping out of high school. So there are a lot of people who do have like lower educations that do work those positions. And then with the economy growing, like technology grew also. So there was less like need for factory workers because machines can do all that stuff now. So jobs were going away. And there wasn't really potential or optimism for those people to continue their education just because, oh, like, you know what, if I drop out, I can at least get a job as a factory worker. But with that change happening, they couldn't really get a job and didn't have as many opportunities that could help provide for their families or themselves, if that makes sense. So yeah, as you can see, they described it as a pyramid, and like motivation just was kind of like, whatever, we don't really care about them. And so they decided to start making changes. And they first decided this when they saw that Japan and Germany were performing better industrially and educationally. And of course, the US, we want to be number one in everything. So they were like, we gotta fix this. This is not gonna work out. If we want to be like top dog in the world, we gotta get our people successful so that they can have high-paying jobs, our economy can grow, our machines and industry can grow. And so then there became presidential involvement in education. And this was through President H.W. Bush and President Clinton. And they established rules and guidelines for explicit knowledge on like what to educate with. So the tests that we have and the objectives that we learn, and just making sure that those are really emphasized so that we have those points. And these councils, they form councils, like a bunch of committees. And in the textbook, it goes into like a lot of detail about like the committees and it's kind of long and lengthy, but they had all these governors running these summits, and they were specifically about education and how we can develop ways for our students to be successful. So I have a video, and this is the No Child Left Behind Act that President Bush put in place. Very controversial. I mean, with a lot of this is like about the controversies that happen in education. And so after we watch it, if you guys just want to like discuss, list pros and cons, just so we can know if you want to write them down, whatever you want to do. No? Yeah.
Literally buy them for you. If you take 60
All time to come together to get it done, so that we can truthfully say in America, no child will be left behind, not one single child.
The president's nearly $48 billion education plan includes testing children annually to more closely monitor reading and math skills, rewarding schools where grades improve, and punishing failing schools by cutting federal money to districts that don't show progress, and allowing parents of children in public schools that fail 3 years in a row to use tax dollars, government vouchers, to move their children to private schools. But this last part, vouchers, makes Democrats wary. In fact, Mr. Bush didn't even mention it by name.
When schools do not teach and will not change, parents and students must have other meaningful options.
Democrats say spending federal money on private schools undermines public schools. Even so, some key Democrats say they're eager to work with the new president.
There are some areas of difference, but the overwhelming areas of agreement and support are very, very powerful.
And other Democrats, including Senator Joe Lieberman, offered their own education plan minus vouchers.
We cannot afford to wait any longer to craft a serious national response to what is clearly a serious national problem.
Wolf Blitzer, CNN, Washington.
Okay, there you go. So just discuss with like groups or partner pros and cons of that, what you think, how was that successful, how would it not be successful, and then we'll discuss.
They're gonna fail worse. If you understand their academic,
Taking away the chance for them to get their feelings and like giving Knew it. Is that okay?
Yes? Oh my gosh, please, I'd love this.
Is that okay?
Oh my gosh, this is so great. Oh my gosh. Oh, they're still coming.
Uno, dos, tres. Cumpleaños feliz. Cumpleaños feliz. Cumpleaños feliz. Cumpleaños feliz.
Yay!
One more time.
Oh.
Cumpleaños feliz.
That was so.
Adios.
Bye, Addie. Bye, Jackie Chan. I love you. That was the greatest musical number I've ever witnessed. That really was great. I'm in class, getting an education. That was tender.
Okay, now we should sing it to her in English.
We'll sing it.
Real fast though, you were gonna tell us what the dinner is.
Okay. I will tell you that. Okay, so if you are a senior and you are coming to senior dinner dance, dinner is going to be, it's going to be a pasta bar. We're going to have pasta, gluten-free pasta, marinara sauce, marinara with meat, Alfredo, salad, rolls, brownie, blondie, and mint brownie ice cream sundaes. Water, strawberry lemonade. Yeah. And it's gonna, I think it's gonna be good. So that's why you should come. If you only come for one reason, come for the food. Anyways, okay, this is gonna get juicy and I'm very excited. Let's hear about this. Pros and cons. Let's start with pros. The positives. There we go.
He does care about the children. Like his reasoning for doing all this is no child left behind. Like his point is all children deserve an education.
Preach. Okay, more pros. We got to get a couple on here, guys. Yes.
He's rewarding schools when they do good.
Very true. Okay, any others? Yes.
I feel like it's gonna be pro or con with the annual testing.
Show stats. Any others? Let's get into the cons. Here we go. Okay. Oh, yeah, we're ready. Kate Ainsley.
The punishing schools part.
Yeah.
Like, it's just gonna make it worse, because like if you're gonna punish a school who's already failing, then it's gonna make it worse. And then with the private school thing, like funding private schools,
Just take all our answers.
do you want me to say it or not? No, go for it. Okay. With funding more of the private schools, like kids who don't have the means to like go to private schools, he did talk about like tax dollars, but honestly, like getting tax dollars from where though? You know? Yeah, people who like already can't get that. Yeah. You know, it's just making it worse.
Carson.
With like rewarding the schools that are doing well, I think that money should go to the schools that aren't doing as well. It's just like giving, like, I don't know, it doesn't make sense in my brain.
That one has pros and cons too, though, because Utah does really well, but we're the lowest appreciation. Yeah.
So it's like
Yeah, for sure. Oakley.
With the like private school thing, I feel like funding private schools would defeat the purpose of private schools, and I also think the government might try and take control over private schools because they'll be like, well, we funded you, so now you get to do what we say. So it takes away the point of what private schools are for.
Yeah, really good point.
Wait, was it funding private schools or was it funding?
Or like putting like.
Wasn't it like giving parents money to put their kid in school if they were?
But then another con to that is like if you're putting all your students, like all those students from middle school to private school, then it's like the private school is just like the public school because it's just a bunch of kids.
It's turning private schools into public.
And then what are you gonna do with the public school? Like, is it just gonna be more kids that are struggling there as well? Like, does that make sense?
Yeah, it's just we all have your.
Like, if that school's not gonna get any better, like forcing like moving students from a public school to a private school won't help that.
Yeah, so one interesting thing about this is that, like, the states took over what we educated, like, the kids. So they, like, required each state to design its own standards and assessments to measure the extent to which students meet the standards. So that can be, like, it's varied from state to state. Super different, just depending on, like, that system. And, for instance, some states within the possibility of federal sanctions for not meeting their benchmarks gain the system by lowering their standards and creating lax accountability for reward mediocre and even poor performance. So like they had poor performance, they didn't do well, and they gained more money, which is interesting. And so there was a point in the textbook that brought up that teachers don't want to teach at schools that are less successful, even though those kids probably need it the most. They want to teach at the schools where kids are doing well and it has good pay, and with those schools, they're not having as much funding. they're not getting, like, their students aren't succeeding and they don't have the funds because of it, and teachers don't want to go there. And it's hard for teachers to, like, I'm sure teachers want to make a difference and they want to say, like, hey, I want to help the most people that I can, but, like, it's hard when when they have a livelihood that they have to meet and they can't do that without having enough money, or, you know, putting themselves in danger, because sometimes those lower funded schools, like, they can be dangerous and they have the risks, but, you know, it's, you know, politics is kind of difficult. Any more things on this anyone want to talk about? No? Okay. Let's see. Okay, so next, tests. We're going to talk about these and we'll see what you guys think. So tests, they set the standards to hold accountability to the teachers, to the students. Yes? It's not, what the crap, guys? I don't know. She's special. That's so odd. Anyways, so she's still doing it? Let's see, guys. What? Spin. Is that better? Is it higher? I think it's working. I think we got it. Yeah. Okay, so states set the standards for accountability. So tests are becoming more intense with the need for success. Like, over time, it's like you have to pass, you have to pass. There's a lot of pressure with that, which is, you know, good and bad. And then many schools and states have guidelines that are needed to pass in order to graduate. So, like, you have to pass a certain test in order to go through the stages of graduating and, like, going through grade levels. Yeah, exactly. And then there's a lot of reformers that argue that state standards show how successful each state is, but, like, it doesn't measure that, because there are some kids that, like, they take a test, they don't perform well, or, like, we know with the state testing, a lot of kids don't try. So what do you guys think about, like, testing, and, like, what are your opinions? Like, do you think assessments should be given in a traditional way, like test taking, or should they be non-traditional, or how would you guys deal with that? Yeah.
Well, I think tests, it kind of depends on, like, the type of class.
Yeah.
It's like in math, you're not going to have, like, a discussion.
Mm-hmm.
Like, what are you like, how do you feel
Yeah.
about it? Yeah, how do you
feel about trick? Like, no.
That's not. But also tests, I don't know. Never mind.
Yeah.
I think for like statistics and state purposes, they're necessary. Like, you need to have them just so you can see where people are at. And they also have to be standardized, so you can't like allow one class to do a discussion and one class to do a test. Like, if you're checking for the whole state, you have to use the same test.
Yeah.
So I feel like the way they do it, although it kind of sucks for everyone, like, it's the best way, because there's not really another like alternative in order to see where everyone's at and like to measure if the kids are learning what they need to learn.
Yeah, for sure. Anyone else? Anything? Yeah, those are some really good points, and I agree. Like, you have to have the standardized tests, which stink, but they do give us information. They are really accurate. But, you know, it's, like, not easy to have tests in, like, the traditional sense. And one thing that they brought up is, in order for, like, kids to do well in these tests, they try and make them a lot of the times multiple choice, because that's, like, you have, like, a 1 in 4 chance of getting the answer right, which is good. And a lot of students aren't successful when they have to, like, write an answer down, and it's kind of like, oh, 1 and done, like, it's wrong. You can't get the answer. So what do you guys like better? Do you like multiple choice better?
Yeah.
For sure? Yeah. No, that's...
Especially with just like a random state test, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Really?
some of them are
She would rather be able to explain her answer than to just. Because like in her mind, especially when it comes,
Yeah.
like with math, it's different. But like English, she can like say she can justify just about any answer if you really try hard enough.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah,
she
that's
would
true.
prefer it. Some teachers, yeah. With math, obviously that's logistical. You only have one answer. But like with English and stuff, multiple choice, you could justifiably, for the most part,
questions.
True.
50-50. Risky or not. Yeah.
Those ones are sometimes confusing because they're like,
Can you not false when it's like should it and like
Oh, when they word it funky and you're like...
and you're like
it's so confusing.
Or which one is the most correct?
yeah, and
All
you're
of
like
them are.
okay, but if they're all correct,
Those ones are buggy.
They're, yeah.
Or all of the above.
So annoying. Oh.
It's like, no, when a teacher puts all of the above for an answer, but it's not the right answer. I always think it's that.
Uh-huh.
I know, I'm like,
Oh, yeah. It's tests. We love
when I
them.
see all these love, I'm
Me too. Usually it's the answer, and then it's not.
My favorite
Why
is when
did
they
you put that on
accidentally
the
shuffle the answer, Yeah, I so know.
Oh,
it's all of the above, but it's like the first one.
No, I love this. This is so fun.
Kahoots, when it's like all the
Oh.
answers are right, you're like,
I know.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just trying to get a point.
I write in Kahoot, kids get so mad.
Oh, I would be.
Multi-select they hate the most.
Well,
that's
no,
what
I
you're
think
saying.
you're like which one?
Oh, yeah.
And it's like all of them, and they're not the two others that are right. You don't get the full credit. So it's like
Not even multi-select, when the teachers do like 4 correct answers, and they're like, which one is right? And you're like sitting there trying to figure it out. But it's
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's the worst.
Okay, so I could have just 30 seconds. Yeah. Sorry.
No, don't apologize, guys. This is so interesting. Do you guys like? I'm just curious. Like, do you say it's like a final at the end of the year and it's not a state standardized test? Would you rather have like tests, like you have to multiple choice or write, or would you rather have like not like an informal assessment or like a project? What would you guys rather have?
Project.
Really?
No. I would rather have a test in some class. It depends. Like I would rather take a math.
Really?
Than draw out a math. Would you rather?
Yeah. Okay, wait. Maddie has something to say really quick.
I think for like core classes, it's nicer to do a project, but also it depends on the classroom. Like if it was a science class or math class, I'd rather just do a test. Because then it's like you study for it, like it's like very exact. I feel
Yeah.
like with English, like my teacher now is doing like a final essay that's more laid back for our project, especially since we just took our.
I just like how the test.
But like for classes that are like the CTE classes and stuff, they all do state tests, and I think those are like the way to go for certain departments like CTE or like home ec stuff like that, just because it's like it measures for the whole state, and I feel like it's just really easy. So.
Oh yeah, for sure. I agree. Yes, Ainsley.
I'd rather do projects. It's so much easier than.
Why are you looking?
Why are you looking right at me? You kept fighting with me.
I was not fighting. I was
Like, you rather do a project where you like can actually get all the points, or a test where it's just like.
Dude, projects, there's teachers that give you like 98 out of 100 and you're like,
I'd rather get like a 98 than like maybe.
but what if you get a 98 on the test?
I won't. That's the thing.
True. Carson.
Projects feel more satisfying because it's like a big
Yeah.
thing that you like put your work into, and then it's just like you're done with it. But like a test,
You don't have to study for
you don't have to study for
I
it.
don't have to study for tests.
A lot of projects you have to research like crazy and they're like impossible.
I don't study for tests.
Yeah, Lou.
Well, I feel like it's just like depending on the project because like Be the Change, everyone remembers that, it was fun.
And I liked them.
You know, but then there's also like maybe a project where you were like, okay, well I'm not really interested in this, I'm kind of being forced to do this.
Like a research paper over a test, I'd rather do a test.
Yeah, I feel like so. It's a project.
Really?
Yeah, I had to like throughout the semester.
Sorry, there's a guy on the roof. Sorry, keep going.
In my projects, were you like throughout the semester we did like little bits of a project, or like we would kind of like write. Like, it was like little things. There were 4 parts to it. So for our 5th part, we have to write all of them together and then submit it to orders.
I'm so sorry. Okay, yes, Miss Lewis has something to say, everybody.
And our starter was about food, and they get food quite regularly, and they're like, why do we do so much about food? And I was like, why not, right? Like,
Yeah.
and so I was like, well, if you guys really want, like, we don't have to do these. We could, I was like, we could, I don't know, but what makes more sense is kind of what we do.
Yeah.
We present it
What would
out
you
there.
quiz? Like, would you quiz them on like English?
No, we don't even have quizzes and tests. And so
Exactly.
It'd be really weird at the end to suddenly be like, and now here's a test about the things that we've learned. Like, I don't even know that I could tell them what to study because it's mostly just
Yeah.
practicing every period. So it was like, if you want, you can like write an essay, and they're like, no,
Yeah.
we want the food.
Does
And
not
they were
sound
like,
fun.
we were really just asking. And I was like, oh, okay, good.
Good to know.
Because I love
You're like, because I don't want to grade essays.
Yeah, it is the same as what we did last year, and I was like, do I do something different this year? But they start the year with a presentation, and then also like that they end the year with a presentation.
Oh, yeah.
So we can see
Progress.
how much they.
So is it like a participation class? Like that's how you
Yep.
With their free presentations, do they bring food in?
Yes.
Like what
No
they
wonder she likes
like what do they do? Just like any food?
So I asked them to bring something that's meaningful to them.
Oh.
Because
Aw.
they have to have a slide about why they care about it. But it can be, like, I think I've got a student who's going to bring in, like, instant ramen noodles. And then he breaks them up and puts the stuff on them dry. And then he does, like, chili and lime as well. And it reminds him of his friends. And he had this, like, whole story about why it
Aw.
was and why it, like, mattered to him.
That's
and, like,
cute.
Like, that can be what it is. But they have to like take a video of them showing us what it is and how to make it, so he'll have to do that at home. And so it's gonna be a really short video for him, whereas for others it might be longer. And they can do it in groups, they can do it.
You undo the
But yeah, so they just have to explain why it matters to them, but you can see the real difference from when they do their like about me at the very beginning of the year versus at the end. Like they're so different and it's so much fun. Of course I do.
Do they in your class all of high school?
They could, if they don't test out. Yeah, so they need it. They can be there 9th through 12th. But most test out within a year.
Yeah, what's up?
I was just gonna say, one of my issues with a lot of projects is that they don't really directly apply to what I'm learning. Like, you have to study one person in depth when you're studying about like a general topic. It doesn't really apply to what you're learning. Like, I would rather learn about the topic itself than like really case study into somebody who doesn't really teach me, you know?
Yeah.
Like with those kind of projects. Or there's other ones that just don't really apply. They're kind of just like oh, this is kind of just a fun project type of thing, but also like we're not really learning anything. I don't know.
Yeah.
Because then tests could just.
That's so funny. I mean, I feel like for me, like I can do a test at the end of the unit and be fine. But if we're talking like final, like end of the whole year, that's not like a project.
I could never.
Yeah, it just depends on what people want and teachers. I think it depends. Like I know you do be the change. But like, do most teachers would you say do like finals or essays?
I know in my English class.
Yeah.
A podcast. Like we're
the final test of the last book we're doing. Podcast, or I'm usually the final test on whatever that current
unit is.
Not necessarily the entire.
Yeah.
I don't know any teacher in the English department, but I could be wrong, that does like a comprehensive test from the whole year. I don't know.
What are your thoughts on that? Do you think those are effective? Yeah.
It's meant to be to remember everything from the whole year.
I was gonna say like what you said, science is like that makes like
if it's concepts, then I feel better about that. But if it's like specific plot points from the book you read at the beginning of the year or something like that.
Into the semester test and then a final test.
Yeah. I think that's asking a lot to remember everything.
Oh yeah.
You only have like 12 classes the whole semester, and then it's the final. No, but you're not in that college class for the whole year.
And we do not have a year. She's not.
We are allowed to.
Is our really last important day here the 19th then?
Yeah, we don't. The 45
She have
minutes
Gildan?
before.
After.
So yeah, our
But it's
our last
split class or something
Saturday
really
that day.
big, right?
And then Gagan was the one. She was the one gonna do the portfolio. Your calendar. Oh my god, I just
Sounds like
Huh.
she thinks she's an hour like you're not.
Okay, let's bring it back. We're gonna move on. No, you're fine. Okay, Common Core. This is gonna get controversial again. So basically, Common Core was an effort designed to set up clear educational standards like in ELA and math, and millions of dollars are poured into this, like billions even. And the government really wanted to create successful schools. So I have another little video. It just kind of explains it, goes a little bit more in depth. And with Common Core, there's a lot of pressure on like schools and states and the districts. So here's a little overview, and then after we're done, just another discussion on like what you guys think about it. Oh, please work. Okay.
Like it or not, life is full of measuring sticks. How smart we are, how fast we are, how well we can, compete. But up until now, it's been pretty hard to tell how well kids are competing in school and how well they're going to do when they get out of school. We like to think that our education system does that. But when it comes to learning what they really need to be successful after graduation, is a girl in your neighborhood being taught as much as her friend over in the next one? Is a graduating senior in, say, St. Louis as prepared to get a job as a graduate in Shanghai? Well, it turns out the answer to both of these questions is no. Because for years, states have been setting different standards for what students should know and be able to do at each grade level. That's making it too hard to know if our kids are really doing well enough overall. And if they can really compete for a job someday. What we really need are clear goals. That's where the Common Core state standards come in. They're like a total sea change in education. Consistent, strong, clear benchmarks for English language arts and math. Here's how it works. You can think of kindergarten through 12th grade like a giant staircase. Each step is a skill your child needs to learn before stepping up to the next one. But right now, too many kids aren't really confident with like 2 plus 2 before they have to move on to 2 times 2. We need more focus on the skills that help them move up the stairs, or they can slip up and fall behind. And here's another problem. What if everyone
Guys, I'm
stairs
sorry.
were made a different height? Well, here we go again. They are. So, a boy in Seattle who's rocking an A in literature could be getting a C on his Chicago friend's staircase. Oops. We need to create consistent steps in education too. So first, each standard creates a landing on the staircase, a stop along the way as your child heads toward high school graduation. Each stop is a chance for every parent and teacher to focus on the skills their students are supposed to know at that step, no matter the zip code, language, or race. And more importantly, each standard makes sure all students are learning what they need to know to get to graduation and beyond. Because something like counting to 100 leads to understanding dollars and cents, which eventually leads to understanding how to manage a budget. Secondly, the standards are consistent from school to school, and they match up against international standards too. Now we know how we're doing compared to just about everyone. So even though local communities will still design their own curriculum, with the same rules, everybody can compete on the same kind of staircase. But standards aren't learning. That's why we need teachers, parents, and students to help make that happen by working together to help kids meet these standards. The world
There's
is more
an
and more
Egyptian
competitive
woman.
every day. But now, when our kids get to the
Yeah,
top
I
of
was
their
just saying,
staircase, they can have way more options on where their life goes from there. Clear goals, confident, well-prepared students.
Period.
That's what Common Core State stands for.
Okay. That was like very happy, middle of the road, positive. So, discuss with a partner or your group, like pros and cons of Common Core education, what you know, like what you listened to from the video, all of it.
Getting the need for standardization in different areas.
Yeah, but then also like when it was comparing like St. Louis and like Shanghai, like they don't have the same opportunities. It's just reiterating. They might not even mean that one place is better than the other.
So it's like, how are you? You're not very well, I think they have the same standards, but I mean, you often, like, I just feel like,
That's awkward. Okay. Okay. Do we feel ready to discuss? Do we have some ideas? I love it. Okay. Let's start with the pros, because we need some positivity and goodness. Any pros to Common Core education, anybody?
Pros?
Yeah. Like, what are some good things about it? Yeah.
Like, if a student has to move, they will be able to continue their education, like, more normally, just because it's, like, standardized between schools.
Yeah, for sure. I saw Carson's hand.
Like the same expectations, like nationwide.
Yeah. Very quickly. Anyone else? Pros. Any good things about this? Yeah.
I like having a standard to teach too. Like
Mhm.
it's nice to know what they want from me, because if you, like in ELD when I didn't know for the longest time, I'm like, am I doing my job? Is anyone learning what they're supposed to do? What do you want
Yeah.
from me? So like it's nice to have standards that you know you are supposed to be teaching.
Mhm. Yeah. Do you have anything?
Well, it's kind of the same on there. I was just gonna say, like, as a whole, like, states and the national, like, government knows what their students are learning, kind of.
Yeah, that's a really good point.
Most of the same education.
Yeah.
That's nice for like just transparency in general, like parents can know and students can know.
Yeah.
You don't have to walk into a class and be like, I wonder what I'm supposed to be learning. Like we're supposed to tell you, like this is
Mhm.
what you're supposed to
Yeah, that's one thing it says, like you're explicit. Yeah. Okay, cons. Yeah.
My specific cons happen to cater to the math. Like the switch to Common Core Math took away like the separate classes. So like my example I gave is I never understood statistics and probability until I took a statistics and probability class. Like just having secondary 1 talk for 1 week about probability, it never like actually linked in my mind. I never understood it.
Mhm.
Like I guess it's nice having the little like brief introduction to everything, but nothing really solidifies until you have an entire thing dedicated to it.
Oh yeah, for
so
sure.
It's like it just kind of like the math specifically, the switch between the two, it was just kind of like a light switch. It was all of a sudden we switched to Common Core.
Yeah.
And so like parents, like my mom goes, I did this, but not like that, or you know, my cousin, her little brother did math completely different than she did when it switched from Common Core to, or from whatever it had to Common Core.
Mhm.
And your parents ask you, what do you learn in your algebra? I'm like, I don't know.
Something.
Go to math.
I don't know.
My brother was like, oh, are you in algebra this year? And I go, I'm in secondary 2.
Or you're in like calculus? Yeah, I'm like in secondary 3 honors.
You're like maybe? I don't know.
Yeah.
Okay. Any other cons that you guys think?
Yeah, and like that's only a Utah thing, I think.
Yeah.
Like,
What's up?
Maybe we just want to learn at the same pace when people
Yeah.
learn at the same pace.
Really good point. Very good point. May or Kylie, do you guys have anything that's a con to you? Or pro even. We can go back to that too. Say it. I gotta get you marked off for your informal assessment.
There's a kind of, well, we were talking about when I moved here freshman year, like 85% of my math class I already knew.
Mhm.
And both my, like in middle school, like my math teachers did Common Core, but they were also a lot older. So I'm guessing they kind of taught how they just always did and probably never told you where it is. And so I think that shows where Common Core is useful, because if they were using more of that Common Core, then I wouldn't have come here and like already known all the math and had to sit in that class.
Yeah, for sure.
So it like fits both sides.
Yeah. This is like
For me, that'd be a pro. I'd be like, yeah, we're over here like, for Oakland, she'd be like, I already know how to do this. I want cooler math.
that's exactly how she sounds.
She's like, when I took my statistics and probability class that we spent 4 months on one subject.
That is
There is so much that goes into statistics.
What?
I had
And
no
impression.
idea.
Yeah.
Okay, how do you feel about that expression?
A little offended. I'm not.
I didn't mean I'm not sassy, but like 2 people.
Oh my gosh.
Maybe to one specific teacher. That was really fun.
Yeah. So I love all the points. Do you have anything? We can come back to you later.
Yeah.
Come back to you later? Okay, cool. Okay, but a lot of the things that they said is like common standards will lead to a national curriculum and a national test, and conservatives and local control advocates strongly resist. They don't like that. And 55, actually this is interesting, 53% like didn't know what Common Core was, and they don't know anything about it. And they're just like, it's for kids in school, and there's like, it's interesting because a lot of people didn't know anything about it, and there's a lot of public information, which is great. So kids know what they're learning, teachers know what to teach, parents know what their kids are learning, but you know, still a lot of people don't know about it.
I didn't know Common Core was English too. I thought it was just math.
Yeah, English and math, and then they've kind of tried to go into, well, they haven't really. They were trying to do like social studies, but that never really worked.
Yeah. So like, it's weird every year when like all of us have to do all this like testing and all these things, and history's over there like,
we're just doing the decades project.
Right? And like when they try and do curriculum maps, there's never really, like there isn't one because there isn't like an agreed upon national standard. And so our district is doing one, but like that's a committee that's putting one together for our district. Not so much because it's like a state regulated thing, mostly just to kind of like cover our butts. So that we like have it somewhere that says that we can teach about slavery and that we can teach about, you know, like some of these things that have been cited or controversial.
Yeah.
But social studies is given a curriculum, isn't it?
Different classes might have a curriculum, like AP has a curriculum, right?
I've only done AP,
we were talking about your curriculum and you showed us that one day. Literally the next day, I was like, I've never looked at the curriculum before.
Huh.
I mean, we're gonna get the social studies philosophy over
philosophy. I don't think it has one. Sim doesn't have one. Like they don't
really
have those.
No, sometimes they'll be like very like foul.
Yeah, exactly. So
Huh.
there's more freedom in that, but also there's more like.
Yeah. That's insane.
You're on poetry and then you can leave 10th grade having like read poetry or whatever. And so then
That's crazy. It was like 20th century. Like I feel like it was. I don't want to say 80s.
But I know I've always
yeah. It's been around for a while, and people are pretty familiar with it, but also not familiar with it because 53% don't know. But it's interesting, too, because I think that's almost good that they're doing that, because have you seen those, like, random interviews where they get people on the street and they're like, what happened, or, like, what state is this, and people have no idea, and it's crazy because, like, they're full functioning American, like, members of society, and then you have, like, all these immigrants and, like, people that are trying to, like, become citizens.
And they're like, I don't want women to take women's suffrage. And I'm like, yes, of course. And you're like, it's
like,
name a country. That's not what it means. You want to end
it's so bad. And then there's like all these people that are trying to come into the country and they're like learning all these things that most Americans don't even know, which is crazy.
class have complained about that. Like everyone has to take the civics test now, but that used to be a requirement. And they'd be like, I know stuff about this country that the kids who grew up here don't know.
Yeah.
Like, why am I being held to a higher standard?
What is all this interesting stuff?
It's dumb stuff.
It's
like how many like senators and House of Reps are there?
It's like general information.
When was the Declaration?
But then like people like will go on the streets and they'll ask them and people have no idea.
I don't even remember taking this.
Me neither.
I think
because I remember being really stressed about it. And they were like, you cannot graduate until pass. And I was like,
I think I blocked out.
I know, I probably blocked that period out of my head. Yeah. Okay.
I should pull out the picture of
Okay, we're gonna bring it back in, continue with the lesson. So one thing that is like a pro and a con is that like states can measure their standards. So like they choose the fail and success rate of like their students. Like what grade is a pass, what grade is a fail. So like for example in the textbook, Virginia students had a higher rate of success than New York students. And that was because their cutoff, like their fail was way lower than the New York students. They had a higher, like you had to get a higher score. And so, but yeah, percentage-wise. So they, like, perform better, but, like, their score wasn't as high in comparison to New York, and they performed less than they did, if that makes sense. So it's kind of a pro and a con, and, like, those cutoffs can make the slightest change. Like, if it's by, like, a couple points and, like, you didn't pass, and whoopsie, like, you gotta retake the class, or you have to do the state standards that they have in order to be able to pass, which is really interesting. So it just depends on, like, the states and what they decide, and I'm not really, like, Utah, I don't know how much they have, like, I don't know every single policy for them, but I feel like most of the time, pretty much everyone passes, if not everyone, like, a lot of things. Would you guys agree, or what do you guys think? Like, state standards, or, like...
So is this for tests, or is this just, like, your grade?
Like, kind of a combination of both. Well, I'd say more tests. Like, like, you know, RISE testing? Yeah. interesting to think about. Okay. So, and with testing, they say a lot of the time, these are some of the flaws that they pointed out. They point out that there is some favoritism and that the tests were written by native English speakers so that they favor native English speakers. So it's easier for them to understand and like have those concepts grasped. Another one is parents, or like a lot of people have said this. It's interesting how you think about it. The more tests you take, the more cheating there is like available. Like students will put answer keys online, or they'll talk to their friends, or you get overwhelmed. Yeah. And parents are really undecided. They're like, I want my kids to take tests, but I also don't want them to fail. So it's kind of like a, toss up. I'm sure you guys agree and you get that, like, you don't know what to do. It's hard. So, and like for teachers, they're like, how do I give my kids a test when like they could find the answers online in 2 seconds? Especially now, like I know that I'm taking online PE right now and I can look up many of the answers and it is helping me pass. But, is that the best for me to learn? Probably not. It is very stupid. I do agree. But, yeah. Anyways.
There's also the issue with parents, like, so standardized tests, like, aspire to that, like, kids can opt out.
Oh, yeah.
And so, like, if parents don't want their kids to be tested, they can opt out. But, like, the more we that's always an option, but that's how we get our funding and all these different things. And so it's like, well, what do we do if, like, all the kids decide to opt out one year and then that's how
we're in trouble.
Like, what do we do? But then it's also difficult as the teacher. Like, I'm fine with a kid who wants to opt out. Please don't, like, advertise it, make it this big scene, right? But then you have to find something else for them to do. Like, parents are like, what will my kid be doing instead? And it's like, oh, okay. And so that's, like, more pressure on us. And, like, I've always had things for kids to do, and it, like, hasn't been a big issue for my classes. But, like, sometimes there's nothing else for a student to be doing. And so I'm like, keep your kid home then. Like, don't make them come sit here, but then it's only one period.
Yeah. Very interesting to think about. Okay, so another way that they do reform is in curriculum. So they like change the curriculum, and this is a policy that was put in place. It's called Race to the Top. And I have another, guys, videos are just kind of saving me because they have a lot more information and relay it better than I do. So this kind of just like explains what it was and what the goals were for it. It was put in place by President Obama. And here's another ad.
My job is to make college easier because students have a lot to do.
Thank you.
In 2009, the federal stimulus bill offered states a chance to compete for sizable education grants.
We laid out a few key criteria and said if you meet these tests, we'll reward you by helping you reform your schools.
President Obama's Race to the Top competition awarded $4 billion in federal money to 11 states and the District of Columbia. But a big question remains. 3 years from now, when the money is all spent, what will states have to show for it? Each of the 12 winners set 4-year goals for themselves to improve test scores, graduation, and college-going rates. But the goals vary widely. Some states set them very high. Rhode Island set one of the highest goals, a 27-point increase in math achievement scores among 8th graders on the National Assessment of Educational Progress, or NAEP. Regardless of how high states aimed, the success or failure of Race to the Top will in large part be judged against how well states hit their targets.
Okay, so now you have a little bit of an overview on kind of what it was. It doesn't go into too much detail. So with this, they didn't want to have government involvement just because that like kind of gets in the way of like constitutional rights and flaws and how the states are in charge of our education. So they left like the standards up to, as you saw, like each state and like what goals they wanted to hit so that they can get that money and have that success. Why is it shaking? And then a lot of people argued that this initiative like flawed constitutional rights. Why do you guys think that? Kind of an interesting topic. I was a little confused, so I just want to hear what you guys think.
Wait, so...
So they rewarded states like to hit certain, if they hit certain education criteria and percentages that the states made as their goals, they like submitted it to the government, then they like got rewarded. And so people are
all those states like on the eastern side got rewarded.
Yeah, with their goals that they made because they had the highest, like they hit their goals. So what are like, how do you think, like, what are pros and cons again to that, and like, how do you think people argue that it flawed constitutional rights? Let's go with me.
I think cons are that only certain states got them, and they were all in the same area. Like it was all on the east side. I think it would have been better if it was more like spread out.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting too because like with research we saw that like Utah has so many kids, so there's less money for each kid, and those states probably have less kids compared to Utah, so they have more money for education for each kid, and so then they got even more